You have 24 hours to demolish that eyesore or we're calling the sheriff. That's what the HOA president screamed at me right before I revealed the secret that would destroy her entire world. There I was, 3 days into building my dream cabin when this woman storms onto my land with a clipboard and an attitude. Victoria Ashworth, HOA Queen Bee, demanding I tear down everything because it violates community standards. The smell of pine sap from fresh lumber mixed with her choking perfume as gravel crunched under more angry neighbors' SUVs. She's waving legal papers, threatening massive fines, acting like she owns the place. Little did she know, I had information that would flip this power game completely upside down. Information that would turn her threats into the most expensive mistake of her life. But before I tell you how one phone call legally obliterated an entire HOA, drop a comment. What would you do if neighbors tried to steal your land? And tell me where you're watching from. HOA nightmares unite us all. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. My name's Marcus Brennan, 45, recently divorced electrician who inherited 5 acres of Colorado mountain paradise from my eccentric Uncle Silas. After months of courtroom hell and living in a cramped city apartment, this land felt like salvation, a place where I could build something real and maybe convince my teenage daughter Emma that her old man wasn't a complete failure. Uncle Silas was the family mystery. Disappeared into the mountains in 1980, showed up at Christmas smelling like wood smoke and diesel fuel, always muttering about land having more secrets than trees. Most relatives wrote him off as the crazy hermit uncle. When his lawyer called saying I'd inherited his property, I figured Uncle Silas knew something the rest of us didn't. The land was breathtaking. Creek water gurgled over smooth stones, hawk cries echoed off granite cliffs, and the sharp scent of pine sap mixed with wild sage created nature's own perfume. There was an old concrete foundation where Silas had started something, plus a workshop that looked like it belonged in a frontier museum. Standing there, breathing air that didn't taste like exhaust fumes, I felt hope for the first time in months. I cashed out my 401k, quit my city job, and started building a modest log cabin. Nothing fancy, just a solid home where Emma could visit weekends and see her dad building something worthwhile instead of tearing his life apart. The rhythm of hammer on nail, the satisfying bite of saw through timber. After months of lawyers and paperwork, honest physical work felt like therapy. Day 3 of construction, she appeared. Victoria Ashworth emerged from a pristine white BMW X5 like some corporate angel of death. Mid-50s, designer business casual, clutching a leather portfolio like a shield. Her heels clicked against the rocky ground with military precision, and her perfume, some floral assault weapon, clashed with the mountain air so violently it made my eyes water. "Excuse me," she marched across my property like she owned it. "Are you the individual responsible for this unauthorized construction?" I set down my circular saw, noting how she pronounced individual like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "Marcus Brennan, building a cabin on my land. You are?" "Victoria Ashworth, Pine Valley HOA president." She flipped through papers with theatrical authority. "This construction violates multiple community covenants. No permits, no architectural review, no environmental assessment. Frankly, this rustic approach threatens our property values significantly." I looked around at pristine wilderness stretching to the horizon. "What community? I don't see any houses." "The Pine Valley Homeowners Association governs all residential properties within our jurisdiction." She produced an official-looking document. "Your uncle signed these covenants when we formed 6 months ago. You inherited his obligations." 6 months ago? Uncle Silas died 8 months ago. She handed me a cease and desist order demanding immediate construction halt, plus a bill for $10,500 in accumulated violation penalties. "Remove all materials within 48 hours, Victoria announced. "Daily fines begin at $500, doubling weekly. We protect our community standards very seriously." The threat hung in the mountain air like smoke, but then she delivered the real message. "Let me be frank, Mr. Brennan." Her eyes swept over my work clothes, beat-up truck, and calloused hands. "This isn't the type of neighborhood where people in your situation typically thrive. We maintain certain expectations about resident quality. I'd hate for your daughter to be embarrassed by any unpleasantness." The mention of Emma hit like a punch to the gut. This woman had researched me, knew about my divorce, my financial struggles, my kid. "Are you threatening my family?" The words came out colder than I intended. Victoria's smile was sharp as winter wind. "I'm offering friendly advice. Some battles aren't worth fighting, especially when you're clearly outmatched." She climbed back into her BMW, but paused before driving off. 48 hours, Mr. Brennan. Don't make this harder than necessary." As her taillights disappeared down the mountain road, Uncle Silas's final words echoed in my head. "Don't let anyone push you around." I stared at the cease and desist order, then at my half-built cabin. Victoria Ashworth thought she had all the power. She was about to discover how catastrophically wrong she was. Victoria didn't wait 48 hours. She came back the next morning with a lawyer and handcuffs-level confidence. A beat-up Honda Civic pulled behind her BMW and outstepped the saddest excuse for legal counsel I'd ever seen. Douglas Krensky looked like he got his law degree from a Cracker Jack box. Cheap suit, coffee-stained tie, briefcase held together with duct tape and desperation. "Mr. Brennan," Victoria announced with theatrical authority, "you're being served with official legal documents. Cease construction immediately and prepare for financial consequences." Krensky nervously shuffled papers. "Pursuant to Pine Valley HOA covenants, you owe $15,000 in retroactive violation penalties. Furthermore, you never received proper HOA disclosure documents during property transfer, voiding your ownership claims." 15 grand? For building on my own land? The smell of Krensky's nervous sweat mixed with Victoria's choking perfume created this toxic cloud of legal intimidation. "I'll review these with my attorney," I said calmly. Victoria's laugh cracked like ice. "You can't afford an attorney, Mr. Brennan. Save yourself the embarrassment." The minute they left, I drove straight to the county courthouse. Betty, the friendly clerk, helped me dig through property records. The musty smell of old documents and fluorescent light buzz created this detective movie atmosphere as I uncovered something that made my blood boil. The Pine Valley HOA was formed exactly 6 months ago, 2 months after Uncle Silas died. I remembered my divorce attorney once telling me that timing in legal documents is everything, and this timing was impossible. The boundaries were drawn like a perfect target around my property, including just 12 houses. My 5 acres represented 60% of their total land area. "That's mighty suspicious," Betty whispered over the property maps. "Looks like someone drew those lines specifically to trap your uncle's land." I pulled more records, and every HOA member was either Victoria's relative or worked for her husband's construction company. This wasn't community governance, it was organized crime with a clipboard. I'd read enough legal thriller novels to know that dead people can't sign new contracts, and neither can you be bound by agreements made after you already own the land. Time for my counterpunch. I called Sarah Kim, a razor-sharp real estate attorney. Her office smelled like fresh coffee and pure determination. "This is legally impossible," Sarah said, spreading documents across her conference table. "You cannot retroactively bind a dead person to new covenants formed after their death. I've seen HOA scams before, but this is brazen even by their standards." "We're filing countersuits," Sarah announced. "Harassment, false claims, intentional infliction of emotional distress, plus investigating how they included your property in boundaries drawn after ownership transfer." But Victoria escalated fast. 2 days later, she called an emergency community meeting, without inviting me, obviously. My neighbor Jake attended and reported back over beers on my porch. The evening air carried wood smoke from distant fireplaces, mixing with pine forest scents that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with this place. "She's got people terrified," Jake said, "claiming you're some dangerous drifter with criminal background. Complete lies, but fear spreads faster than truth in small communities." Then came the digital warfare. Victoria created a Pine Valley Community Safety Facebook group, posting my photo, stolen from an old union newsletter, alongside warnings about transient criminals threatening our children and property values. The comments were vicious poison. "Get this predator out. My kids aren't safe. Sheriff needs to act now." But Victoria's arrogance became her downfall. In her rush to prove the HOA had money for legal action against troublemakers, she posted their financial records publicly. Those numbers told a shocking story. $847,000 collected in special assessments over 6 months. For 12 houses, that's over $70,000 per family. For what? No community amenities, no shared facilities, no infrastructure projects. I'd learned during my own divorce that legitimate expenses always have paper trails. When lawyers can't show you exactly where your money went, it usually went into someone's pocket. Sarah nearly choked on her coffee when I showed her the Facebook evidence. She just publicly admitted to massive financial fraud. Victoria handed us a federal case on a silver platter. The next morning brought Victoria's nuclear option. A county inspector's truck pulled into my driveway. The inspector, clearly uncomfortable, handed me a citation for multiple building violations that would shut down construction completely. "Sorry, buddy," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "Orders from the top. Someone's got serious pull at the county office." The metallic taste of corruption hung in the mountain air like smoke from a distant fire. As his truck disappeared down the mountain road, I realized Victoria had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd escalated from civil harassment to government corruption, using taxpayer-funded officials to settle personal vendettas. But she'd just handed me the nuclear option. Federal agencies don't just investigate financial fraud. They investigate public officials who take bribes to harass private citizens. Victoria thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She had no idea I was about to flip the entire board. Victoria's next move came at 3 a.m. with the sound of breaking glass and the acrid smell of diesel fuel burning my nostrils awake. I stumbled outside to find my construction site looking like a war zone. Someone had taken a baseball bat to my lumber pile, scattering 2x4s like giant pickup sticks. My generator lay on its side, fuel soaking into pine needles with that sharp chemical stench that made my eyes water. Roofing nails glittered across my access road like deadly confetti, strategically placed to shred any tire that dared cross them. The message was crystal clear. Victoria was done playing legal games. By sunrise, I discovered my truck sitting on 4 flat tires and an anonymous EPA complaint in my email claiming I was destroying sensitive wetlands. The wetlands in question? A tiny seasonal creek that had been babbling through my property since before Victoria was born. But the psychological warfare was just beginning. Around noon, cars started appearing across my driveway entrance. Not completely blocking access, that would be obviously illegal, just positioned so I'd have to perform automotive gymnastics to reach my own land. When I approached those drivers, they claimed to be concerned citizens exercising their constitutional right to park on public roads. The taste of manufactured innocence was more bitter than the diesel still lingering in the air. Then came the fake safety signs. Official-looking, hazardous construction zone, authorized personnel only warnings sprouted along the mountain road like poisonous mushrooms. They looked legitimate enough to fool my contractor Pete, who called in a panic. "Marcus, I got 3 customers asking if I'm licensed for hazardous waste cleanup," Pete said, his voice tight with worry. "Word spreading that your site is contaminated. I can't afford to lose other contracts over this." Victoria had weaponized my community connections against me. I remembered reading somewhere that the best con artists always turn your own resources into weapons. And she was proving that theory perfectly. But sabotage meant desperation, and desperate people make traceable mistakes. Sarah and I spent the next day following paper trails at the courthouse. The musty smell of old documents mixed with Betty the Clerk's coffee created this detective movie atmosphere as we uncovered Victoria's real game. Mountain Vista Resorts had approached the county 6 months ago with plans for a $50 million luxury resort. The proposed location needed my 5 acres as the scenic centerpiece. Spa views, golf course elevation, helicopter landing pad proximity. According to the development agreement, they couldn't break ground without acquiring all residential properties within the designated tourism corridor. My land wasn't just in Victoria's way. It was the golden key to her treasure chest. "Look at this consultation fee," Betty whispered, pointing to a line buried in county planning documents. Mountain Vista paid someone $400,000 for community relations consulting. Sarah's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "That's not consulting. That's a bribe with a business card." Suddenly, Victoria's aggressive timeline made perfect sense. She wasn't just collecting HOA fees. She was earning a massive commission for delivering my property to developers. Every day I held out cost her hundreds of thousands of dollars in resort profits. That night, I put my electrician skills to work installing a comprehensive security system. Motion sensors, night vision cameras, the works. If Victoria wanted to escalate to criminal behavior, she'd do it in high-definition color. I didn't have to wait long for the feature presentation. Around midnight, a pickup truck crept down my access road with headlights off, engine barely whispering through the mountain silence. The driver, wearing a hoodie that couldn't hide his familiar jawline, began pouring something from a gas can near my lumber pile. My cameras captured everything in perfect detail, including the moment he looked directly into the lens like a deer caught in headlights. Tommy Ashworth, Victoria's son, 20-something kid who'd apparently inherited his mother's talent for felony-level stupidity. The next morning brought my counterpunch. I walked into the sheriff's office with USB drives full of video evidence. Tommy's midnight arson attempt, complete with facial recognition and license plate identification. Suddenly, Victoria's concerned citizen narrative crumbled faster than her son's alibi under questioning. But I wasn't finished digging. The HOA's public filings revealed a treasure trove of financial fraud. Security consulting payments to companies that didn't exist, landscaping services from Victoria's brother-in-law who lived in Florida, and legal research fees that would make Supreme Court justices blush. Victoria had been systematically looting the HOA treasury while positioning herself for the resort payoff. She was double-dipping, stealing from neighbors today while planning to cash in on their land tomorrow. As I watched Tommy's arson footage for the 5th time that evening, the mountain air carrying the scent of pine and approaching storm clouds, I realized something crucial. Victoria wasn't just greedy, she was trapped. The resort deal probably had deadlines, and every day I remained meant she risked losing everything. Cornered animals bite hardest just before they die, but they also make the most spectacular mistakes. Victoria's response to her son's arrest was swift, vicious, and completely unhinged. The next morning, I woke to find a process server on my doorstep with an emergency injunction. Victoria was claiming I was building an illegal commercial facility and demanding the court force me to demolish everything immediately. The paperwork alleged I was planning to operate a transient housing operation for undesirable elements that would destroy the moral fabric of our community. The smell of fresh legal ink mixed with morning pine air as I read through 15 pages of creative fiction. Victoria wanted $100,000 in community damages and was asking for an immediate restraining order preventing me from entering my own property. But that was just the warm-up act. By noon, 3 county inspectors swarmed my land like locusts. Environmental compliance, building safety, septic evaluation, all writing citations for violations that didn't exist. The lead inspector, Rodriguez, kept apologizing under his breath while photographing my perfectly legal electrical work. "Sorry, man," he whispered. "Orders from way above my pay grade. Someone's paying serious money to make your life hell." The metallic taste of corruption hung heavier than the mountain fog rolling in. During my divorce, I'd learned that when legal intimidation fails, bureaucratic harassment becomes the go-to weapon. Endless inspections, impossible compliance demands, death by 1,000 paper cuts. But Victoria saved her cruelest blow for last. That afternoon, my ex-wife Linda called, her voice shaking with fury. "Marcus, what the hell is going on? Emma's friends are showing her Facebook posts calling you a sex offender. She's locked in a room crying, asking if her daddy is really a monster." My blood went Arctic cold. "What posts?" "Some community safety group with your photo and warnings about registered predators targeting children. Complete lies, but Emma's classmates are treating her like she's contaminated." Linda's voice cracked. "She wants to know if she's safe visiting you anymore." The thought of my 15-year-old daughter reading those lies, having friends whisper and point, made my vision blur with rage. Victoria had weaponized my own child against me, crossing every line that mattered. "It's all fabricated, Linda. I'm fighting a corrupt HOA trying to steal my land for developers." "Fix this," she snapped. "Some judges consider social media scandals harmful to minors. This could affect your custody rights." After she hung up, I sat in Uncle Silas's workshop, surrounded by the scent of old wood and motor oil, feeling 40 years of family history pressing down on me. This wasn't about property anymore. Victoria was threatening my relationship with the only person who truly mattered, but her desperation had created my opportunity. That evening, my neighbor Jake knocked with urgent news. "Marcus, Victoria's group posted another emergency alert claiming you threatened to burn down the neighborhood. They're using a photo of you holding what looks like a weapon, actually your circular saw, but photographed to look menacing." The Facebook comments were a feeding frenzy. "Call SWAT. Armed and dangerous. Protect our children." But Jake leaned closer with the real intelligence. 3 HOA families approached me privately. "Victoria's threatening their property assessments if they don't sign statements against you. They're terrified of her now, not you." More importantly, HOA Treasurer Beth Morrison had been asking uncomfortable questions about missing money. Victoria had been dodging audit requests while demanding more special assessments from members. "Beth found invoices for companies that don't exist," Jake whispered. "Payments for work never performed. She's demanding a full financial review and Victoria's panicking." This gave me the counterpunch I needed. I called Sarah immediately. "Victoria's financial house of cards is collapsing. If we can force an emergency HOA audit before she destroys evidence, we've got her." "Even better," Sarah said. "False sex offender accusations are federal defamation crimes. We can file criminal charges while pursuing the financial fraud." But I wanted to hit Victoria where it really hurt, her wallet. The next morning, I drove to every business Victoria's family owned or frequented. Armed with screenshots of her false posts about me being a dangerous predator, I had very calm, factual conversations with managers about their liability for supporting defamatory campaigns against local citizens. Small mountain communities live on reputation. When the auto shop, grocery store, and hardware store all suddenly became too busy to serve the Ashworth family, word spread faster than wildfire. By afternoon, Victoria's own mother called her demanding an explanation for why the family was being shunned by local businesses. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the mountains and rain began pattering against my cabin windows, I felt the tide finally turning. Victoria had overplayed her hand, attacking too many fronts simultaneously while her financial crimes were being exposed. But I also knew desperate criminals don't surrender quietly. They detonate everything around them. The smell of approaching rain mixed with pine sap reminded me of Uncle Silas's final words about the land having secrets. Tomorrow, I would discover exactly what he meant, and Victoria Ashworth would learn that some secrets have the power to destroy entire kingdoms. The next morning, I was prying up floorboards in Uncle Silas's workshop when my crowbar hit something that definitely wasn't wood. The metallic clang echoed through the dusty space like a bell announcing destiny. Beneath 40 years of accumulated sawdust and motor oil stains, I found a steel lockbox the size of a briefcase, painted military green and locked with a combination that had probably been set during the Carter administration. The musty smell of old documents hit me like a wave when I finally cracked it open using Uncle Silas's birthday. The old romantic had used the day he bought this land. Inside were manila folders thick as phone books, corporate seals that felt substantial as gold coins, and enough legal paperwork to choke a courtroom. But it was the incorporation certificate on top that made my hands shake. Brennan Holdings, LLC, incorporated March 15, 1998. Sole proprietor, Silas J. Brennan. My uncle hadn't just owned 5 acres of mountain paradise. He'd secretly formed a holding company 27 years ago and used it to quietly acquire something that would change everything. The next document explained how he'd pulled off the financial coup of the century. In 2010, the original developer who built the Pine Valley subdivision went bankrupt during the housing crash. While everyone else was running away from real estate, Uncle Silas stepped in like a ghost and bought up all the defaulted mortgage debt for pennies on the dollar. Not the houses, the actual land underneath them. Every single property in what would become Victoria's HOA kingdom was built on land that Uncle Silas owned through his holding company. The homeowners had been paying their mortgages faithfully for over a decade, thinking they owned their land. But legally, they were tenants, and the property management company that collected their monthly payments, it forwarded everything to Brennan Holdings, LLC, which explained how a mountain hermit could afford his comfortable lifestyle. I was holding the deed to an entire neighborhood, 47 houses, 12 of which had formed Victoria's precious HOA, all of them sitting on land that belonged to me now. The taste of Uncle Silas's pipe tobacco still lingered in the workshop air, mixed with the weight of documents that felt like they could crush mountains. I understood now why he'd kept this secret buried. Owning people's homes without them knowing is the kind of revelation that destroys families and fractures communities. But it also meant something else, something that made my pulse hammer against my temples. Victoria Ashworth, HOA president and queen of harassment, had been collecting fees and threatening fines on land she didn't own. Her own house, the command center for her campaign of intimidation, was sitting on property where she was 3 months behind on rent. I could legally evict her with 30 days' notice. The bank records in the lockbox showed everything: monthly rent payments flowing into Brennan Holdings accounts, property tax receipts, maintenance expenses for roads and utilities that the homeowners thought they were paying for through their HOA fees. Uncle Silas had been the invisible landlord for an entire community, collecting rent through a management company while letting people believe they owned their land. The incorporation papers were genuine, stamped with official state seals, and notarized by attorneys whose signatures could be verified. The property deeds matched perfectly with county records. The bank accounts were real, and the money trail was clear as mountain stream water. I sat in Uncle Silas's workshop chair, surrounded by the scent of old leather and forgotten secrets, holding papers that gave me more power over Victoria Ashworth than she'd ever dreamed possible. I could evict every HOA member who'd participated in harassing me. I could sell the entire development to Mountain Vista Resorts and become a millionaire overnight. I could destroy lives the same way Victoria had tried to destroy mine. But Uncle Silas's final words echoed in the dusty air. Don't let anyone push you around. He hadn't said push back harder. He'd said, don't let them push you around. There was a difference. And that difference would determine what kind of man I chose to be. The weight of Uncle Silas's secret sat on my shoulders like a lead blanket as I spread the incorporation documents across Sarah's conference table. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the gravity of what we'd discovered. I wasn't just fighting an HOA anymore. I was the landlord of everyone who'd been trying to destroy me. This is legally bulletproof, Sarah said, examining the corporate seal under her desk lamp. Your uncle was meticulous. Every document properly filed, every payment tracked, every legal requirement met for 27 years. She pulled out a legal pad and started sketching our options like a general planning a campaign. Plan A, reveal your landlord status immediately and negotiate HOA dissolution. Clean, simple, gets Victoria off your back permanently. Plan B, selective enforcement. Terminate leases only for the harassment ringleaders. Victoria, her family, maybe 2 or 3 others. Let the innocent neighbors stay. Plan C, full nuclear option. Media exposure of the entire scheme. Federal investigation of HOA financial crimes. Complete community upheaval. I thought about Emma reading those horrible Facebook posts, about my neighbors who'd been manipulated by Victoria's lies, about Uncle Silas choosing to keep this power secret for decades. What about Plan D? Use the leverage to build something better. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Explain. Victoria's been stealing from these people while lying about property ownership. What if we expose the financial crimes but offer the community a way forward? Reduced rents, actual ownership opportunities, turn this toxic HOA into something that helps families instead of destroying them. While Sarah researched legal precedents, I called my electrician buddy Jake to help with the technical preparation. We drove to his shop where the familiar smell of copper wire and electrical components reminded me that I had skills beyond legal warfare. "You're really going to need this recorded," Jake said, helping me test a professional-grade audio system. "When you drop this bombshell, you want every word documented for legal protection." Back in my truck, I reflected on something I'd learned during my apprenticeship years ago. The most powerful electrical systems aren't the ones that create the biggest sparks. They're the ones that deliver exactly the right amount of current to get the job done. Too little, and nothing happens. Too much, and you burn down the house. This situation required precisely calibrated power. That afternoon, I brought in Beth Morrison, the HOA treasurer who'd been asking uncomfortable questions about the finances. We met at a neutral location, the local diner, where the scent of apple pie and honest conversation felt like a sanctuary after weeks of legal warfare. "I've been suspicious about our books for months," Beth confided over coffee that tasted like liquid courage. "Victoria's been dodging audit requests while collecting unprecedented fees. We've paid $847,000 in special assessments this year alone, but I can't find records of where that money went." I slid photocopies of Victoria's fraudulent invoices across the table. Companies that don't exist, services never performed, consulting fees that would make Congress blush. Beth's hands shook as she reviewed the evidence. "She's been stealing from us while threatening our homes. But Marcus, even if we expose her, how do we protect families who've invested their life savings in these properties?" That's when I knew Plan D was the right choice. Over the next 2 days, Sarah and I crafted a presentation that would serve multiple purposes. We'd expose Victoria's crimes while offering the community a path forward that honored both justice and compassion. The legal documents were prepared in triplicate, stored in multiple secure locations, with copies sent to federal investigators who specialize in HOA fraud cases. I also reached out to Emma for the first time since Linda's angry phone call. My daughter's voice was small and hurt when she answered, but I could hear hope creeping in as I explained the truth about Victoria's lies. "So you're not really in trouble, Dad? The stuff online about you being dangerous, it's all fake?" "Completely fabricated, sweetheart, and soon everyone will know the truth. But Emma, I need you to understand something important. When people try to hurt you with lies, the best response isn't more lies. It's the truth, delivered at exactly the right moment." The community meeting was scheduled for Friday night at the Pine Valley Community Center. Victoria had called it as an emergency session to address the dangerous individual threatening our neighborhood. She had no idea she was about to provide the perfect stage for her own downfall. As I sat in my completed cabin that evening, listening to the creek babble through the pine trees and watching stars appear in the clear mountain sky, I felt Uncle Silas's presence in the night air. He'd kept this secret for decades, waiting for the right person and the right moment to use it wisely. That moment had arrived. And unlike Victoria's campaign of destruction, this revelation would build something better from the ashes of her greed. Tomorrow night, truth would have its day in court. Victoria's desperation reached new heights when she tried to have me committed to a mental health facility. The paperwork arrived Tuesday morning via emergency court filing, a petition claiming I was displaying signs of severe psychological instability and making credible threats against community members. Victoria had somehow convinced a judge that I was dangerous enough to require immediate psychiatric evaluation and possible involuntary commitment. The smell of fresh legal documents mixed with my morning coffee created a surreal breakfast atmosphere as I read through her latest work of fiction. According to Victoria's sworn statement, I had been obsessively surveilling neighbors, making threats about burning down houses, and exhibiting classic signs of paranoid delusion and violent ideation. She'd even included witness statements from 3 HOA members claiming I'd approached them at night, ranting about conspiracies and threatening to make everyone pay for what they'd done to me. Complete fabrication, but terrifyingly official looking. By noon, things escalated beyond legal documents. A convoy of pickup trucks appeared at the end of my access road, Victoria's citizen patrol armed with hunting rifles and self-righteous fury. They weren't technically on my property, but their message was clear: step out of line and face frontier justice. The metallic taste of fear mixed with mountain air as I watched them through binoculars from my cabin porch. These weren't professional security guards. They were scared neighbors who'd been convinced I was a genuine threat to their families. Jake called with worse news. "Marcus, Victoria's brother-in-law is the county sheriff. He's planning to serve that mental health warrant this afternoon with a full SWAT response. Claims you're armed and dangerous, requiring maximum force protocols." My blood went cold. During my electrician days, I'd wired the homes of guys who'd been swatted over neighbor disputes. Too many of those stories ended with body bags and accidental shootings during dynamic entries. But Victoria's overreach was also creating unexpected allies. That afternoon, Emma called crying. Not from embarrassment this time, but from fury. Dad, kids at school are showing me posts claiming you're a terrorist planning to shoot up the neighborhood. This is insane. How can she just lie like this? Because desperate people do desperate things, sweetheart. But sometimes their desperation becomes their downfall. Emma's voice grew steely. She had more of her old man's fight than I'd realized. What can I do to help? I'm not letting this crazy woman destroy our family with lies. While Victoria was busy painting me as a dangerous lunatic, she was also frantically trying to cover her financial tracks. Sarah's investigator friend discovered Victoria had been making substantial cash withdrawals from HOA accounts, $127,000 in the past 2 weeks alone. The money was supposedly for enhanced security consulting and emergency legal expenses. More telling, she'd been pressuring HOA members to sign loyalty pledges promising not to cooperate with outside investigators trying to destroy our community. 3 families had already approached Sarah quietly, terrified of Victoria but unwilling to publicly oppose her. But Victoria's nuclear option backfired spectacularly. The mental health petition required supporting documentation from medical professionals. Victoria had submitted a psychological evaluation from Dr. Richard Pemberton, claiming he'd observed me displaying textbook symptoms of antisocial personality disorder with violent tendencies. Problem was, Dr. Pemberton had been dead for 6 months. Sarah's paralegal discovered the death certificate while verifying the evaluation's authenticity. Victoria had literally forged a psychological assessment using a deceased psychiatrist's stolen letterhead and signature stamp. That single desperate lie had just upgraded her legal troubles from civil fraud to federal document forgery, a felony carrying up to 10 years in prison. She's completely unraveling, Sarah said, reviewing the fraudulent evaluation. This level of criminal behavior suggests someone facing massive financial exposure. The resort deal must have deadlines she can't extend. But Victoria wasn't finished destroying herself. Thursday evening brought her final, most spectacular mistake. Frustrated by the delayed SWAT response, turns out judges get cranky about obviously forged medical documents, Victoria decided to take matters into her own hands. Security cameras caught her sneaking onto my property around midnight, carrying what appeared to be accelerant and matches. Her plan was apparently to set a small fire near my lumber pile, then call 911 claiming I was burning evidence of my criminal activities. The irony was perfect. Victoria Ashworth, who'd been calling me an arsonist for weeks, was literally attempting arson to frame me for arson, but my upgraded security system included motion-activated floodlights that turned midnight into noon the second she crossed my property line. Victoria found herself standing in my driveway holding a gas can and road flares, illuminated like an actress on Broadway, with 3 different camera angles recording her every move. Her scream of surprise and rage echoed across the mountain valley loud enough to wake bears in neighboring counties. As I watched her scramble back to her BMW, I realized Victoria had just handed me the ultimate trump card. Video evidence of her attempting to commit the exact crime she'd been accusing me of planning. Tomorrow's community meeting was going to be even more interesting than I'd anticipated. Victoria's final desperate gambit came with sirens, flashing lights, and the kind of media circus that destroys lives permanently. Friday morning, I woke to the sound of helicopter rotors and the acrid smell of exhaust fumes from a dozen emergency vehicles parked across my access road. Through my cabin windows, I could see news vans, sheriff's deputies, and what looked like half the county's emergency response team setting up a perimeter around my property. My phone was buzzing with missed calls from reporters, all asking variations of the same question. How do you respond to allegations that you're holding your neighborhood hostage with explosive devices? Explosive devices? I stepped onto my porch holding a cup of coffee and immediately had 6 rifle scopes trained on my chest. Marcus Brennan, Sheriff Davidson's voice boomed through a megaphone. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. The taste of surreal terror mixed with mountain air as I realized Victoria had played her nuclear card. She'd convinced law enforcement that I was some kind of domestic terrorist preparing for a violent standoff. Jake's voice crackled through my phone. Marcus, don't move. Victoria filed reports claiming you threatened to blow up the community center during tonight's meeting. She's got photos of you handling suspicious packages and testimony from 3 witnesses. The suspicious packages? Bags of concrete mix for my cabin foundation. The witnesses? Probably the same imaginary people who'd provided statements for her fraudulent psychological evaluation. But this time, Victoria had overestimated the gullibility of law enforcement. Sheriff Davidson approached my porch cautiously, his expression more embarrassed than aggressive. Marcus, I know this is probably bullshit, but we got federal authorities breathing down our necks about credible terrorist threats. I need you to let us search the property so we can clear this mess up. Search away, Sheriff. But you might want to check out the security footage from last night first. I handed him the USB drive containing Victoria's midnight arson attempt. Davidson's face went through several interesting color changes as he watched our HOA president caught red-handed with accelerant and matches, trying to burn down the property she'd been claiming I wanted to destroy. "Well," he muttered, "that's going to complicate her credibility significantly." While the bomb squad spent 3 hours confirming that concrete mix was, in fact, concrete mix, Sarah was busy filing emergency motions to have Victoria arrested for filing false police reports, attempted arson, and terrorist threat hoaxes, federal crimes that would put her away for decades. But the media circus was just getting started. By afternoon, news crews from Denver had arrived, drawn by reports of a mountain standoff with alleged domestic terrorist. Victoria, ever the opportunist, positioned herself as the heroic community leader protecting innocent families from a dangerous extremist. Standing in front of cameras with perfect makeup and practiced tears, she painted a picture of a peaceful neighborhood terrorized by an unstable outsider with a grudge against civilization itself. "This man has threatened our children, destroyed our sense of safety, and now he's apparently prepared to commit mass violence rather than follow simple community guidelines," Victoria sobbed into the microphones. "We just want our neighborhood back." The performance was Academy Award caliber, if the Academy gave awards for creative fiction. But Victoria's media strategy contained a fatal flaw. In her rush to appear sympathetic, she'd agreed to multiple live interviews without consulting lawyers. And live television doesn't allow for editing out inconvenient truths. Channel 7's investigative reporter, Maria Santos, had done her homework. During what Victoria thought would be a softball interview, Maria casually mentioned the HOA's financial irregularities. "Mrs. Ashworth, records show your association has collected nearly $850,000 in special assessments this year. Can you explain where that money was spent?" Victoria's confident expression flickered like a candle in wind. "Well, we've had significant legal expenses dealing with this dangerous individual. But the legal expenses listed in your public filings total only $23,000. Where did the other $827,000 go?" The pause that followed lasted about 3 seconds on television, but felt like 3 years in real time. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while her brain tried to manufacture an answer that wouldn't incriminate her further. That's confidential community business," she finally stammered. "Confidential? Mrs. Ashworth, you're discussing this matter on live television while accusing your neighbor of terrorism. Surely financial transparency is relevant to your credibility." By evening, the story had shifted from "dangerous mountain hermit threatens community" to "HOA president accused of massive fraud while filing false terror reports." Social media was buzzing with questions about Victoria's financial management and the suspicious timing of her escalating accusations. As the last news van disappeared down the mountain road, leaving behind only tire tracks and the lingering smell of diesel exhaust, I realized Victoria had just committed professional suicide on live television. Tonight's community meeting would be less about her accusations against me and more about her explanations to neighbors whose money she'd been stealing. The hunted had just become the hunter. The Pine Valley Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. 89 people packed into a space designed for maybe 60, with news cameras positioned along the walls and county officials occupying the front row like judges at a trial. The smell of nervous sweat mixed with the scent of old coffee and decades-old carpet created an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria stood at this podium like a general addressing troops before battle, her PowerPoint presentation titled "Protecting Our Community, the Marcus Brennan Threat Assessment." She'd dressed for victory. Sharp business suit, perfect makeup, voice projection that would make theater directors weep with envy. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, clicking to a slide showing my cabin, "we gather tonight to address the clear and present danger that Marcus Brennan represents to our peaceful community." I sat in the back row, wearing my cleanest work shirt and holding a leather document folder that contained enough legal dynamite to level mountains. Sarah sat beside me, occasionally glancing at her phone where federal investigators were sending real-time updates about Victoria's financial crimes. Victoria's presentation was masterful manipulation. Photos of my threatening construction project, screenshots of my menacing social media presence, actually pictures of electrical work I'd posted to help other contractors, charts showing declining property values in areas with transient populations. "This individual owes our community $97,000 in accumulated fines and legal fees," Victoria announced, her voice rising with righteous indignation. "He has repeatedly threatened violence against families, attempted to intimidate our children, and yesterday was investigated by federal authorities for terrorist activities." The crowd murmured with fearful approval. These were good people who'd been fed a steady diet of lies for months, and Victoria's performance was convincing enough to sell ice to Eskimos. "Furthermore," she continued, clicking to a financial slide, "Mr. Brennan's continued presence threatens a major economic development opportunity that could benefit every family in this room. Mountain Vista Resorts has offered our community partnership in a $50 million project that would create jobs and increase property values significantly." Ah, there it was. The real motivation finally revealed in public, recorded by 3 news cameras and witnessed by county officials. Victoria had just admitted on the record that this entire harassment campaign was about clearing my land for developers. She opened the floor for victim impact statements, and 3 rehearsed neighbors delivered tearful testimonies about feeling unsafe and terrorized by my presence. The performance was so synchronized it looked like community theater. Then Victoria made the mistake that would haunt her forever. Does anyone else have concerns about this dangerous individual threatening our community? I stood up slowly, my leather folder tucked under one arm. I do, actually. Victoria's confident smile faltered like a mask slipping. You're not a member of this community. You have no right to speak here. Actually, Victoria, I said, walking calmly toward the front, I think you'll find I have every right to speak. In fact, I have more rights in this room than anyone else. The crowd's murmur shifted from supportive to confused. Victoria's face was turning the color of old snow as I approached the podium. My name is Marcus Brennan, I announced to the room, and I'm the sole owner of Brennan Holdings, LLC. I opened my folder and removed Uncle Silas's incorporation documents, holding them high enough for the cameras to capture. Which means I'm the legal landlord of every single house in this subdivision. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear individual heartbeats. Then the room exploded into chaos. Gasps, shouts, the scraping of chairs as people turned to stare at neighbors they'd never realized were fellow tenants. Victoria grabbed for my documents like a drowning woman reaching for a life preserver. That's impossible. This is our neighborhood. We own these homes. You own the structures, Victoria, but the land underneath, that belongs to me, has for 27 years through my uncle's holding company. I spread the property deeds across the podium like playing cards. Every monthly payment you thought was going to your mortgage company, it was actually rent, forwarded to Brennan Holdings. Every HOA fee you've been collecting, you've been stealing money from people for managing land you don't own. Sheriff Davidson stepped forward, his expression grim with understanding. Mrs. Ashworth, you've been collecting association fees on property that belongs to Mr. Brennan? Victoria's mask finally cracked completely. You can't do this. I've spent years building this community. You're just some drifter who doesn't belong here. Actually, I said, pulling out the rent payment records, you're 3 months behind on your own rent, which means I have legal grounds to evict you with 30 days' notice. The room erupted again. Victoria lunged for the documents, screaming about property rights and community standards until Sheriff Davidson was forced to restrain her. But I'm not here for revenge, I announced over the chaos. I'm here to offer partnership. Those of you who participated in harassment campaigns have 30 days to find new housing. Everyone else, your rent just got cut in half, and we're building a real community together. As federal agents entered the room to arrest Victoria for wire fraud, her final scream echoed through the mountains. You can't do this to me. I am this community. But communities aren't built on theft and lies. They're built on truth. 3 months later, I was sitting on my cabin porch watching neighborhood kids play safely in what used to be Victoria's restricted access common area, when Emma arrived for her weekend visit with a huge smile and news that made my heart soar. Dad, I got into Colorado State with a full scholarship, and she announced, wrapping me in a bear hug that smelled like her mother's shampoo and teenage hope. And you know what convinced the admissions committee? My essay about how my father taught me that real strength isn't about getting revenge. It's about building something better from the ashes of corruption. Victoria Ashworth was serving 18 months in federal prison plus paying $150,000 in restitution to the families she'd defrauded. 6 of her harassment enablers had quietly moved away, their leases terminated, and their crimes documented for posterity. The remaining 41 neighbors had embraced our community transformation with enthusiasm that surprised everyone, especially me. The smell of barbecue smoke drifted from Jake's backyard, where half the neighborhood was gathered for our monthly potluck dinner. These same people who'd once viewed me as a dangerous outsider now brought me casseroles, borrowed my tools, and asked my advice on everything from electrical problems to teenager management. It's incredible how quickly fear dissolves when the person spreading it disappears, Sarah observed, joining Emma and me on the porch with a beer and the satisfied smile of someone who'd helped David slay Goliath. Our professional relationship had bloomed into something deeper, built on mutual respect and shared victory over institutional corruption. The community transformation exceeded my wildest dreams. With rent reduced to half their previous mortgage payments, families suddenly had money for home improvements, their children's education, and actual emergency savings. Mrs. Peterson had started a thriving community garden where Victoria's Aesthetic Compliance Committee used to issue citations for unapproved flower colors. The kids who'd once been taught to fear me now knocked on my door asking for help with science projects, drawn by stories of the electrician who'd outsmarted the adults with nothing but patience and legal documents. But the most meaningful change was the Silas Brennan Community Justice Fund, established with money recovered from Victoria's fraudulent schemes. The fund now provided free legal aid for families fighting corrupt homeowner associations across 3 states, and had already helped expose similar financial crimes in 17 communities. "We got another call yesterday," Sarah reported, checking her phone. "Family in Oregon facing the exact same playbook. City council trying to condemn their family farm for an Amazon warehouse, using the same bogus community benefit arguments Victoria used for her resort deal." Emma looked up from her scholarship letter, eyes blazing with inherited determination. "Are we going to help them, Dad?" "We're going to try, sweetheart. Uncle Silas taught me that real power builds communities instead of tearing them down." The financial resolution had been surprisingly healing. Rather than maximizing profits, I'd offered longtime residents the opportunity to purchase their land at cost, with zero-interest financing through the Justice Fund. Most chose to stay and become genuine homeowners for the first time in decades. The development rights Victoria had promised to Mountain Vista Resorts, I donated them to the Colorado Conservation Trust, ensuring the surrounding wilderness would remain wild for Emma's children and their grandchildren to explore. Property values had actually increased despite, or perhaps because of, the cooperation that replaced Victoria's authoritarian control. Turns out people pay premium prices to live where neighbors help instead of harass each other. As purple twilight settled over the mountain peaks, I reflected on Uncle Silas's profound wisdom. He'd kept the secret of land ownership for decades, waiting for the right person and moment to use that power constructively. Some secrets are too dangerous for weak hands but become instruments of justice in strong ones. Emma was reading college brochures by porchlight when Sarah handed me a thick envelope postmarked from Portland. "That Oregon family I mentioned? They've heard about our victory and want to know if the guy who destroyed an entire corrupt HOA can help them save their century-old farm from corporate greed." I opened the envelope, breathing in the scent of hope and new challenges. Another David versus Goliath story, another chance to prove that ordinary people with extraordinary determination can still triumph against corrupt systems. "Ready for your old man to take on City Hall next, Emma?" Her grin was pure mischief mixed with fierce pride. "Let's do it, Dad. But this time I want to help with the legal research." As we planned our next battle for justice, children's laughter echoed across the valley where Victoria's angry threats used to ring. Sometimes the sweetest victory is building something so beautiful it erases the memory of ugliness. Drop a comment sharing your own HOA nightmare story. You're not alone in these battles, and your experience might help other families fighting similar corruption. If this story helped you understand your rights against predatory community associations, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell for HOA Stories, where we expose the truth about power-hungry neighbors and the legal weapons ordinary people can use to fight back. Next week, when City Council tried to steal our family farm for Amazon warehouse, they had no idea about great-grandpa's mining claims.
Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode made you laugh or shake your head at HOA madness, hit that like button and drop your opinion below. We post HOA Karen Chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week, so be sure to subscribe to catch the next unbelievable story.